Today, Russia has admitted that it has moved troops into the Ukraine to protect Black Sea Fleet's positions. Now, Ukraine, of course, this interim government is accusing Russia of staging an armed invasion. Crimea is along Ukraine's peninsula, and it has very strong ties to Russia. The population there is nearly 60% ethnic Russian, and it's very pro-Russian as a whole. So just on the heels of Russian troops moving into Crimea, Russian lawmakers are now proposing two bills that would simplify both the annexation of new territories into the Russian Federation and the process of granting Russian citizenship to Ukrainians. This signals that Moscow may be attempting to absorb Crimea. An unidentified Russian official told the Financial Times, if Ukraine breaks apart, it will trigger a war. They will lose Crimea because first we will go in and protect it, just as we did in Georgia in 2008. Now, given the latest developments, including Russia's recent military buildup and Sevastopol's city council handing power to a Russian citizen Monday evening, while more than 1,000 protesters were outside chanting Russia, Russia, it's highly unlikely that Moscow will be giving up Crimea without a fight, but clearly indicating just how involved and what a central role the U.S. played in the overthrow of their democratically elected government there. Ukraine's new interim prime minister is a former banker who met with both John McCain and Victoria Nuland weeks before Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych had even fled Kiev. So they were planning this weeks in advance. Now, back in December, around the same time that top U.S. diplomat Victoria Nuland announced that the U.S. had invested $5 billion to help Ukrainians achieve a new form of government, Senator John McCain met with Svoboda party leader Ole Tyanibok, and they shared the same stage at an event during which McCain gave the United States blessing for the opposition revolt. As recently as 3 weeks ago, Nuland met with both Tyanibok and Arseniy Yatsenyuk, who is now Ukraine's interim prime minister. And in a leaked phone conversation that we played on Infowars.com, again, Nuland was caught red-handed scheming to install Yatsenyuk in the government before President Viktor Yanukovych had even fled Kiev. So we can definitely see the New World Order bankster motives going on there to set up this EU puppet government. Now, Yatsenyuk's history as a banker makes him the perfect candidate to help assume this role of technocrat and give over, sell the Ukraine into the IMF debt slavery. And according to Zero Hedge, they report today it's already begun. The annexation of the country's banking system by a benevolent Europe is complete. Ukraine's national bank has imposed temporary limits to withdraw money from foreign currency deposits to sums equivalent to no more than what would amount to about $1,500 a day, also known as capital controls. Now, Ukraine's currency is crashing at a record pace, and so they'll limit the amount of foreign currency in circulation. The people there are, of course, able to withdraw as much of the country's currency as they wish because the country can just print up as much as they want to. So in summary, first, the banks are going to abdicate their control to a pro-European central bank. And now the citizens face the first of many capital controls, which will simply aggravate the fund outflow. Even more, it's going to lead to an even faster drop in foreign reserves. And then they report that we will see inflation and a counter coup, much like we saw happen in Egypt.
U.S. warns, of course, over the weekend and over the past few days, mostly coming from the Obama administration, and National Security Advisor Susan Rice warns Russia to keep its military tanks out of the Ukraine. Why is Ukraine so important? Again, I thought this was about, freedom. I thought this was about this really pretty chick here, wanting the same freedoms that we have here in America. I mean, what's this revolution about? And why would Susan Rice be so adamant to warn the Soviet Union and Vladimir Putin specifically, which they just closed the games, they just closed up the Winter Olympics? Why would they be warning Russia? Much of this has to do with not just the military and Russia's military and the position of their sea fleet in the region in Crimea, but also the United Nations and the European Union's ability to integrate Ukraine into the debt Ponzi scheme that makes up the European Union. Of course, by integrating Ukraine into the debt Ponzi scheme, they have control over Ukraine. And that's exactly what the European Union is. That's exactly what these bailouts are. And it's exactly why, if you read in the finance section today, volatile Ukraine may now face default risk. They might have a sovereign default, which means the European Union has to save it, which means once they saddle Ukraine with even more and more debt that's owed to the European Union and owed to these New World Order bodies, creating forever indebtedness into infinity, which is what the European Union is, which is what the United States is. Ukraine owes everything to the European Union, U.S. interests, and Western-backed nations, namely the United States and the United Kingdom. So it's exactly why you're reading now, volatile Ukraine may now face default risk. This is exactly, of course, what the United States wants. It's what the European Union wants. It's what the UK wants. It's what these NGOs want. It's what these Western nations want. This is what the war is about. Now, once they have control of Ukraine, this is a strategic military and economic position to take against Russia. There was another update earlier this morning. It says Ukraine calls for urgent aid. Give us debt. Give us your debt, European Union. Save us, United Nations. Integrate us into the debt Ponzi scheme so that we owe you everything and the United States takes control. Of course, this has all been pre-planned. Why do you think they put out this video? Why do you think they're making this about democracy when it's really about military intervention and control of a country economically? Also, Ukraine has a tremendous amount of natural gas exports that run through directly and run through the Ukraine that make up 80% of those transfers to Europe and to those member countries of the European Union. I'll get to that in a moment. People want to know why Russia is important. Well, for Europe, Ukraine is most important for its location. Why Ukraine is important, particularly as a transit state for energy. Roughly 25% of the European Union's natural gas comes from Russia, and 80% of that gas transits Ukraine. So that's why the United States and the European Union's interested in Ukraine. Roughly 25% of the European Union's natural gas comes from Russia, and 80% of it has to just miraculously transit through Ukraine. How convenient to have a revolution in this country. Ukraine's transit role is likewise important to Russia, but Russia also values Ukraine because of other economic industries like steel and agriculture that have served as vital inputs for Russia's economy from the Soviet era to the present. But here is where it gets even more serious, folks. Russia's interests in Ukraine go beyond the economic sphere. Ukraine is also important for military reasons. The Ukrainian city is the headquarters for Russia's Black Sea Fleet, their navy. Ukraine's strategic location is a borderland between Russia and Europe, and its proximity to Russia's own breadbasket and economic heartland make the country key to Russia's geopolitical strength and ultimately its survival. Isn't that interesting? Not only does it account for 80% of all natural gas that transports through Ukraine to the European Union and Western interests, but it's also where Russia just happens to station their navy fleet, their navy vessels, airplanes, their military. Again, this is all about war, folks. This is a Cold War. You didn't think Snowden and all this stuff happened by accident. You didn't think this Ukrainian video just happened by accident. No, this is about economic and military control, which the United States has just successfully toppled an independent sovereign nation like they do throughout the world time and time again, whether or not it is Ukraine or it's Egypt with a revolution and a re-revolution instigated by NGOs and the U.S. government. All you have to do is take a look at this natural gas map to see the movement of natural gas through Ukraine. 80% of it, which goes to the European Union, to countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, Italy, Austria, Germany, Belgium, France, and the good old warmongering UK, to see why the United States has an interest in this. And all you have to do is take a look at a map and see that Russia parks huge buttloads amounts of their Navy fleet, of their Black Sea Fleet in Crimea, in this area. 70% of the Black Sea Fleet's infrastructure located in Crimea, Ukraine, keeping 161 planes and helicopters in this area, airfields, under the terms of its lease deal with Ukraine, to understand why the United States has just successfully, by the way, toppled this independent sovereign foreign regime under the guise of democracy and democratization. This is the same thing we happened with the Arab Spring protests. None of it started organically. There might have been some organic elements, but it was very much pushed by the United States. Big money, arming the insurgents, funding the terrorists, funding Al-Qaeda. This is what the United States does. This is what these NGOs do under the acronym NGO, that no one understands what an NGO even is, who these billionaires are that orchestrate these films and these movements, whether or not it's Coney 2012 or it's this really, really pretty girl saying, I am a Ukrainian, stop shooting us snipers, we want freedom. Total lies. This is, of course, is a integrated New World Order agenda by the United Nations, by world superpowers, by the West, to integrate them into a system of indebtedness through the European Union, through that Ponzi scheme, so that they can take control and position for war against Russia and Vladimir Putin. None of this happens by accident. This is all massive propaganda that we're engaged in. This has elements and reminds many Americans of the Cold War era, and this is all leading up to war. Once the United States defaults itself and we reach the next bang, the next light show, the next phase of the economic collapse here in the United States, expect it to translate into war. With Russia in focus, with the United States in focus, with countries like China in focus, which are now, by the way, not buying U.S. debt anymore, just selling it in droves and purchasing, tons and tons of gold at the moment so that they can internationalize their currency and become less American-centric and more Chinese-dominant throughout the world. And trade things like oil, etc., outside of U.S. dollars, which are currently the reserve currency, which will no longer be in the not too distant future.